Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. 1 month after the start of the Israel-Hamas war, how do the Palestinian people view the situation today? What do they believe is Israel's real intent? And do they think that shuttle diplomacy by the American Secretary of State or speeches by Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah can actually make a difference? Joining me today live from Ramallah is the well-known and highly regarded Palestinian leader, a former Minister of Higher Education of the Palestine Authority, a former chief spokesman of the Palestine Liberation Organization, and a former member of its executive committee, Dr. Hanan Ashrawi. Dr. Ashrawi, let me start by asking, what do you believe is the situation in Gaza today as we record this interview? Israel says it has surrounded and encircled Gaza City. It says it's split the strip into two. Its airstrikes have killed over 10,000 people and over 25,000 are injured. So as we speak, what are conditions like for Palestinian people in Gaza?
Well, you just explained it actually. They are undergoing a horrific situation of genocide, of massacres, of ethnic cleansing, of bombing, of shelling, of killing, with no constraints, with no accountability. And it's not just a humanitarian disaster. It's a situation where people know that they have no options. They can either die by starvation and thirst, or die by bombing and shelling, or die from wounds that cannot be healed because of the health sector being completely collapsed, and so on. So it's an area where death is lurking everywhere, by air, by sea, by land, relentless, and targeting primarily civilians. Innocent women and children, whole families are being eradicated. And of course, I don't want to talk about military plans. I mean, what Israel is doing is certainly way beyond the military campaign. It is a massacre and genocide.
Yesterday, in a statement that he made, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, said this is not just a humanitarian crisis, it's a crisis of humanity. Does that description adequately sum up what's happening?
It does. I'll tell you why. Because nobody is stopping it. Because humanity as a whole is seeing a big portion of it being targeted and massacred in a big slaughter campaign, and is unable to do anything about it. So the question is the humanity of the international community, whether singly as states or countries or people, or whether collectively in its multilateral system and its accountability system and so on. So people of conscience are being questioned. And when he talks about the crisis of humanity, it's the lack of humanity of what Israel is doing, but also the lack of any kind of intervention and curbs imposed by humanity as a whole. And it questions the conscience and the moral fiber of humanity. But I just want to make a bit of a caveat here, because I believe that there are people who are not just waking up, but who are challenging leaderships, who are challenging governments, who are demonstrating and protesting in the streets, who have seen the horror and the ugliness of these massacres and crimes against humanity. and they are speaking out, and they are challenging their own governments. The irony is that in countries that claim to be democratic, they're not listening to their people. They're
I'll
only
come to what you're talking about in a moment's time, Dr. Ashrawi. You're referring to the massive protests in London, Washington, but several European capitals and also Latin American capitals. I'll come to that in a moment's time. Let me first put to you one or two things said by the Israeli side, which have got a fair amount of attention in the Western press, and I would very much like your response as a senior Palestinian to them. On Sunday night, Rear Admiral Hagari at a press conference confirmed, or revealed rather, that photographs showing tunnels under the Qatari and Indonesian hospitals in Gaza, which he claims are areas where Hamas is allegedly hiding. He also said that these photographs suggest that rockets have been fired from cemeteries into Gaza City. He said that rocket launchers have been found beside swimming pools and playgrounds. And all of this, he claimed, was intended to back up Israel's assertion that Hamas is hiding within and under schools, ambulances, hospitals, refugee camps. How do you, as a Palestinian, respond to these claims made by the Israeli side?
Well, I'll tell you what the Palestinians in Gaza said. They said we would like to see the international community, all humanitarian organizations, the UN, everybody come and look and inspect. Look, Israel has been fabricating and manufacturing so-called evidence and pictures and photos and so on. They brought the company, the firm, the construction firm that built a Shifa hospital, for example, and they proved that this opening that they said was a tunnel under the hospital. They proved that it was only a place where they put the fuel for the generators and so on. And there is no evidence whatsoever to corroborate that. But Israel has always used this as an excuse to target civilians. Israel has destroyed most of the hospitals there. People are dying for lack of care and attention, in addition to lack of electricity, and therefore they don't have the facilities in order to carry out operations or provide the care. This is one thing. But this is how they try to justify the massacre. This is how they claim that they are in a state of self-defense, which is nothing compared to what is being done to the civilians.
The British newspaper, The Telegraph, commenting upon what Rear Admiral Hagari had shown, said that he had shown footage which shows Hamas gunmen firing at Israeli forces from inside the Qatari hospital in Gaza. If that footage is accurate, that does clearly seem to suggest, won't you accept, that Hamas is using hospital cover for its militant activities?
Now, this is the usual lie that we've heard repeatedly. Every time Israel attacks Gaza, every time it kills hundreds or thousands of Gazans, it claims that it is using Palestinians as human shields, that it is using schools or hospitals, and there is no proof and there is no evidence. You can easily Photoshop any photo, and they've done that repeatedly. So let me just not have to respond to all the spin machine manufactured talking points, and let's look at the real issues. Israel is an occupying power. Israel has been occupying and torturing Palestinians since its creation, and it was created on Palestinian land, and through a series of scores of massacres in which they totally obliterated villages and towns, 50-some villages and towns, and carried out collective massacres against captive population, and continue to do so since 47, 48. So, and without accountability, but it got used to having its own version presented, and it got used to having the West swallow hook, line, and sinker all the narrative that Israel is capable of.
Dr. Ashrawi, I understand the point you're making, but for the sake of the audience in India, can I ask, do you and do the Fatah colleagues of yours in Ramallah endorse the stand taken by Hamas that an independent investigation, perhaps under UN auspices, is the best way of clarifying whether Hamas is using hospitals and refugee camps for cover? Do you endorse that?
Of course. I think there should be room and space for. First of all, I'm an independent, and I have always been. I'm not a member of any party, whether Fatah or Hamas or anybody. I'm a Palestinian committed to the cause of my people, so I speak my mind. I'm telling you very openly that It is time. It is time that we have impartial investigators. Israel refuses to allow any international body to enter Palestine. Even the special rapporteurs of the UN, ask Francesca Albanese and others, they are not allowed to come in, Richard Falk and so on, because Israel wants to have a free hand and doesn't want to open up for any kind of impartial, objective investigation. But I think what is happening in Gaza is so horrific, it is so unconscionable, that there should have been investigators from the beginning. The international community should have been there and should see for itself what is happening. When you enclose a whole nation and you want to starve them to death, you close off. And they openly said it: no water, no electricity, no food, no fuel, no medicine. Isn't this genocide of the worst degree? Either we will kill you and shell you and bomb you, or you will starve and die of thirst and so on. So
let me then ask you, Dr. Ashrawi, 30 days after the war began, it began exactly a month ago on October the 7th, we're recording on November the 7th. What do you believe is Israel's real intention in Gaza? Do you accept that it is limited, as they say, to obliterating the Hamas leadership, or do you suspect it goes further even if Israel is not admitting it?
I think it goes further because, look, they themselves have given out several conflicting, contradictory messages. I don't think they know what they want. From the beginning, they said they want to destroy Hamas, all of it. Then they said they want to obliterate Gaza as a whole. I mean, Netanyahu himself said he wants to turn Gaza into rubble. This is the one time he's not lying, but most of the time, every time he opens his mouth, he lies. Then they said, well, they want to just take over the north. They want to change the borders of Gaza, and they want to evacuate the north. So it's ethnic cleansing of the north of Gaza. Then they said, well, we don't know. We don't want Hamas to survive, but we don't know what will happen after Hamas. We don't want to reoccupy. No, we want to occupy. Then they started quoting all sorts of messages about how to obliterate a whole people, or trying to find somebody to run Gaza, or maintaining this latest version by Netanyahu. He wants to maintain total security control over Gaza. Gaza has been under occupation since 1948. Gaza has worked, and in 67, Gaza has been pummeled, has been bombed, has been shelled, people have been killed. It is the most deprived, highly densely populated area in the world. And yet it has survived even the most extreme measures of the Israeli occupation. Now, they don't know what to do with Gaza, so they're trying to find somebody to take this.
Can I pick up on what you referred to a moment ago when you spoke about Prime Minister Netanyahu's recent comment? You were referring to what he said to ABC, the American television channel, in an interview that I believe happened early this morning. He said that Israel will be responsible for Gaza's overall security indefinitely. Now, there, he's clearly saying something that President Biden has publicly advised him against, but nonetheless, he's saying it. How do you, as a Palestinian, view the prospect of Israel being indefinitely responsible for overall security?
Well, it has been responsible for overall security for a long time, and it failed. I told you from the beginning, it's been an occupying power. It's been killing and destroying and bombing and shelling, but and holding Gaza as under siege, and it failed. You know why? Precisely because it does not want to look at the real issue. It doesn't want to look at the real problem in order to find the real solution. It just thinks using more violence, more bloodlust, more killing, more destruction, that it can achieve what it has failed to achieve for decades, since 48. If Israel wants to have any kind of solution or peace or security, it cannot continue enslaving and pummeling and killing and destroying Palestinians. It has to come to terms with the Israeli occupation and with the essential humanity of the Palestinian people, and with our right to live in freedom and dignity on our own land. This is the only way forward.
Recently, there have been reports in several papers and documents produced by Israeli think tanks And according to the press, these documents have also been considered by Israeli ministers, although not by the cabinet officially. And these documents speak of pushing the people of Gaza into the Sinai. They try and estimate the cost of doing this, and they also try and estimate the alleged benefits to Egypt. This suggests that one strand of thinking is to actually enforce what would amount to a second Nakba. Push the Israelis who were first moved to Gaza, now out of Gaza into Egypt. Again, although this is not official Israeli policy, it has been produced by Israeli think tanks and considered by Israeli ministers. How do you respond to this?
Yes, this is the continuing Nakba. It never stopped because the Nakba, which is the essential catastrophe that accompanied the creation of the State of Israel, was based on ethnic cleansing and on massacres and on uprooting and dispossessing the Palestinian people and expelling them from their own homes and lands. This is the meaning of Nakba to us. So now they want to continue doing the Nakba, i.e., massive ethnic cleansing, displacement and replacement of the Palestinian people, thinking that this will produce any kind of peace or stability or security. Now, the essential racism, the essential attitude that they can do anything they want to people, that we are at their disposal, at a chessboard where they can move us where they want, that human beings have no right. Palestinians cannot live on their own land, they cannot thrive and prosper on their land, that they have to be removed and relocated and dispossessed and killed and so on. This kind of arrogance, this kind of racism cannot be, comprehended, let alone accepted in this day and age. But unfortunately, because Israel has enjoyed preferential treatment and acted with full impunity outside the law, it is not only capable of articulating such policies, but trying to implement them. And that's why we need active intervention, because Israel has to be held to account. There have to be consequences.
So you do believe that this think tank is revealing some measure of the truth of Israel's actual intention?
They actually discussed it openly. And now they're trying to say, well, we cannot kick them all. Look, they even recruited Biden and Blinken to go to the Arab countries to tell them, take the Palestinians. Who are you? Who appointed you God? Really, to expel a whole people and to render them invisible or refugees again. They're trying to remove the Palestinians from their land for the second time. 75% of Palestinians in Gaza are refugees already. And when they look outside the prison they live in, they see their original cities and towns. It's not Ashkelon, it's Asqalan. It's not Ashdod, it's Asdod. These are Palestinian towns and cities and villages from which they were expelled. And they were lumped together in this teeny-weeny area in the world in a situation of utter horrible deprivation and pain. And then now they are told, no, we don't want you here, so let's move you somewhere else forcibly. What they're doing in the north, look at the map. They are really carpet bombing, scorched earth, the north. Then they tell them you have to go south. Why? Because they want them to move south and then kick them out into the desert, into the Sinai. Egypt told them this is a red line. It is our own national security. Jordan said the expulsion of Palestinians and turning them into refugees again is an act of war. That's why they're now pulling back, because they cannot impose this solution, not just on the Palestinians, but on the whole region. And ironically, the Americans sort of take their cue from Israel, and they do what Israel wants. Now, nobody is going to play ball with this.
Let's talk a little about Secretary of State Blinken. He first came to Tel Aviv. He wanted a humanitarian pause. He was rebuffed by Netanyahu. Since then, in the ABC interview we discussed a moment ago, it seems Netanyahu said he's open to humanitarian pauses, an hour here, an hour there, as he put it. But he added a condition, according to Al Jazeera, provided hostages are exchanged during those 1 hour pauses. So clearly what he's offering to ABC is going to be difficult for anyone to accept. But then when Blinken went to Amman, he was rebuffed both by the Jordanian and by the Egyptian foreign ministers, who in his company insisted a ceasefire has to happen immediately, even though that's not the American position. So do you feel, both from the result he got in Tel Aviv and from what he heard in Amman, that Blinken's shuttle democracy has failed?
Yes, it has failed precisely because it was destined to fail since it adopted the Israeli point of view from the beginning. They rushed to Israel instantly, Biden and not just Blinken. They said, you have the right to self-defense. So they gave them the excuse, they gave them the framework within which to work. And then they bought them more time. Then they sent, for heaven's sake, in a day or two, aircraft carriers to the Mediterranean and now nuclear submarines. They sent billions of dollars worth of weaponry, and they gave them billions of dollars more. And they are complicit. People think that this is an American war. This is an American-Israeli war on the Palestinians. So now what they're trying to do is very disingenuous, trying to pretend that they have a sort of humanitarian edge to their work because they're seeing that they are not going to win elections next year, next fall. The Democratic Party is already losing faith, but the fact that the progressive parts and the sort of diverse groups within the Democratic Party are not going to vote for him. There are certain swing states that are now he's losing because of what he's doing on behalf of Israel. So it is also very disingenuous to talk about these pauses. What do you mean? Let's just stop firing so we can take out a few hostages and then we will kill the Palestinians again. We will fight. If you want really hostages, then Israel is holding over 7,000 Palestinians. More than 2,000 of them without any trial, without any proof, without any evidence, administrative detention. So, okay, you want hostages, have a complete exchange of hostages. That's it. That will work. But to say we will open the borders to bring in a bit of water and a bit of bread for the Palestinians and take a few hostages and then we will sell them and bomb them again and kill them is not just disingenuous, it's very cynical and cruel.
At the same time as Blinken was speaking, on Friday, the Hezbollah leader Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah also made a speech. The whole world was agog waiting to hear what he had to say. Now, as you heard that speech, do you believe he laid down red lines which, if Israel crosses, Hezbollah will enter the war? Or, behind the rhetoric, did he actually try and disguise a reluctance to enter the war? Both views, as you know, were being discussed over the weekend. Which of the two do you agree with?
I think there's a bit of truth in both. It's very hard to see how much further Israel can go beyond the genocidal mass murder, really. What are you waiting for, people are saying. What are the red lines? People didn't get it. And maybe the reluctance is due to the fact that the U.S., using all its force, along with the Europeans, who are, sort of minor, but of course the UK did send warships and others are sending money and so on, and support, that they tried everything possible to put pressure on everybody in the region, Arab countries, Iran, by proxies, by messengers and so on, not to do anything because they are willing themselves to use utmost force and power against anybody who dares intervene. And that this was a very clear message. The fact that they brought all this weaponry, I said, if there's no place for them to dock in Gaza, it will sink if they have all these weapons in Gaza. And went around threatening everybody. This led to a reluctance because it's not going to be contained. It led to a reluctance on the part of Hezbollah or others that they can enter the fray, so to speak, without having the Americans move to take massive.
So you're saying this massive display of American military presence has restrained Hezbollah?
Temporarily. It has restrained many people temporarily. But this is something, look, they are meddling in the region. They have bases in the region. They have bases in Iraq, in Syria, countries that they bombed and they invaded and so on. They still have their ships and so on there, and they are occupying powers there. And then they bring in also more weaponry in order to say that they are protecting themselves. So what are you doing in our part of the world in the first place? You don't have to have your army here and then send more weapons and so on in order to claim self-defense. Take them back to the States. Nobody's going to attack your army in the States. The problem is that they don't want to widen, they said, the scope of the military operations, but they themselves are widening it, and they are laying the foundations of tremendous instability and violence, if not immediately, but in the future.
Let
The
me
US
take up
has
that
lost
point.
any credibility and any influence in the region.
Let me take up that particular point you're making, Dr. Ashrawi. There's no doubt that the Arab street right across the Middle East has reacted with extreme anger. But what about Arab governments? Do you think they've done enough to put pressure on Israel? I know Jordan and Bahrain have withdrawn their ambassadors. But what about Saudi Arabia, by far the most powerful Arab country? Has it done enough? Should it have used the oil weapon which it can?
Of course, had it used the oil weapon, things would have come to a head very quickly. Yes, the Arabs have tremendous power. But many, and of course, it's the Arab regimes who take decisions, not the people. As you know, the people have been extremely expressive and supportive and were part of the struggle of the Palestinians. It's the Arab leadership that is sadly remiss, and the Islamic world that has been sadly remiss, because they talk the talk but don't walk the walk, frankly. There is also a long held misconception that your source of strength and legitimacy is your alliance with stronger powers, primarily the US, rather than your being genuine with your own people. Your credibility and strength come from the support of your own people. They seem to think that it comes from being nice to the US. I mean, it has played scare tactics. It has managed to convince many people that their influence, their legitimacy, their longevity, even as regimes, depends on the US. But now they're beginning to see that it's a great liability. And they told Biden that and Blinken that very openly, that you are provoking our people, the Arab street, so-called, against their own leadership. And they don't want to see the Arab street sort of rebel and create even further instability. So there has to be an immediate intervention, they said. But of course, Israel does not listen even to its own allies, even to those who have really put their faith and fate in the hands of the US. So I think that there is a real reconsideration of the configuration of the region now. It has strengthened certain areas. It has shown, excuse me, just one more thing, that this is not just East and West. This is also the post-colonial white powers and the global South. It's the North and the South. It's East and West. It's the whole system that was based on colonial white man's supremacy and so on, now coming to a head. And because if you look at the 121 countries that voted for heaven's sake, a ceasefire, you will see them mainly from those who did suffer from colonialism and racism and domination and control and theft of resources. These are the people who know what's happening. Unfortunately, the UN, of course, is dominated by veto-holding powers and reflects the winners of the Second World War. But that paradigm has to shift, has to change. Because
I hear what you're saying, Dr. Ashrawi. In that context, do you feel a little let down by Saudi Arabia? Even the comments made by Crown Prince Mohammed have been fairly mild and tepid. There's been much stronger stuff said by King Abdullah, by President Sisi, but Crown Prince Mohammed has been very measured, very tepid, and by far he is the most powerful Arab leader. So do Palestinians
yes,
feel a
there
little
are
let down?
various degrees of letdown. Look, the Palestinians particularly in Gaza field, have been let down by everybody. I mean, they appreciate the fact that Jordan and Egypt did not want to take Palestinian refugees. But at the same time, they know that this is self-preservation. So we don't think they woke up one day and decided, that's it, we have to save Palestine. Had the Arabs, all of them, including Saudi Arabia, had the will to use all their resources and all the power that they have, I'm not saying invade Israel, but to send a clear lesson to the US and to Israel that there are consequences, that you cannot constantly bash the Palestinians and think they will submit, you can bash them into submission, or that you can have peace and stability while you continue with this extreme situation of injustice, of pain, of destruction and death. Then they will learn a lesson. Then they will start thinking about how to resolve the issue, not about compounding the error which produced this result. So I don't want to talk about Saudi Arabia out of context, or Indonesia out of context, or whatever country out of... The world has let the Palestinians down. Guterres was right. The humanity of the world is in doubt now. And the helplessness of even powerful countries is also very evident. And of course, the alliance of the white North and colonialism, this has become very apparent. And we are seeing now a new, as I said, reconfiguration and polarization, perhaps.
You're absolutely right when you say the world, and perhaps the Arab world in particular, has let the Palestinians down. Worse, before October 7th, the world was also in danger of forgetting about the Palestinians. But since October 7th, and you referred to this a little earlier, something remarkable has happened in Western capitals, in Washington, in London, all over Europe, in Latin America. Hundreds of thousands have been demonstrating. And it's incredible. They've done it for 2 weeks in a row. And in America, even American Jewish voices like Jewish Voices for Peace overran Grand Central Station. They took over the hall of the US Congress. How do Palestinians view this response from the public of these Western countries?
That's the only source of hope, frankly. Palestinians have been extremely encouraged and heartened by this outcry, by this public expression of support, by the people themselves who went out into the streets, who defied their governments. Look, in Washington itself, over 300,000 marched onto the White House. And they said, that's it. It's not just the diversity. I mean, you had Native Americans, indigenous peoples, you had the blacks and Black Lives Matter, you had the women's movement, the LGBTQ movement, you had the universities and the academic movement, you had people, from all walks of life and persuasions. And of course, the very active Jewish groups, anti-occupation and human rights and justice groups, the Jewish Voice for Peace and the If Not Now organization and so on, are just incredible. They're the ones, as you said, who occupied the Congress and who occupied the Grand Central Station. And they are standing up to Israel's claim that it speaks on behalf of all Jews, because they know that they have a conscience and they have morality and values. And they do stand, and they have been standing with the Palestinians, because it's a question of right and justice and morality and humanity. Now, this sent a message to the Palestinians that despite the fact that in France it was illegal and you could be fined, in the States, if you say from the river to the sea, you could go to jail. I can't believe this. Or if you criticize Israel, you could go to jail and be accused of being anti-Semitic and so on. But the people defied their own governments. And this sends us a message that this rift, this disconnect between the people and the so-called democratic leadership in so-called democratic countries has to be looked at very seriously. They cannot continue with this blind support of Israel, with this giving it a blanket cover for everything it does, and then expecting to be rewarded when elections come, or when the people criticize them, or when they walk away from their own parties and so on. So there is a change. The people of the North are moving along with the countries of the South.
My
And
very last question, and I ask this of you.
yes, it has to be.
I ask this of you as an independent Palestinian who, as you said a moment ago, is no longer a member of any political party.
I was
After,
never a member. Mhm.
after October 7th, when Hamas action has forced the Palestinian issue back on the international agenda, as I said, even Arab countries were willing to push it aside, but Hamas has now forced the world's attention on it. Has
Yes.
Hamas also established itself as the principal voice of the Palestinian cause? Has it overshadowed Fatah and PLO in the eyes of the Palestinian people?
Right now, I think so. Right now, because they see how it is being targeted and smeared and maligned and being, in a false way accused of being Al Qaeda or accused of even being carrying out a Holocaust. They use all these false analogies. So people are not willing in any way to criticize Hamas. But I think when the dust settles, then there will be a reconsideration. There will be a calm assessment. You cannot ask people to think clearly when they are being bombed and shelled and starved, and when children are seeing their families pulled out of the rubble in pieces, and children are put. Anyway, so this is not the time to sit down and say, okay, now sit back and reflect. When you don't have water for your children, when you don't have food for your children, when in the West Bank you are being arrested and tortured and killed. We had 4 people killed under torture. We have hundreds being arrested. We have thousands, as I said, under administrative. People aren't saying, okay, now we're not going to vote for Hamas, we'll vote for Fatah or for PFLP or whatever. No. People are saying this is an assault, an attack that targets the whole of the totality of Palestine, all of the Palestinian people, the Palestinian cause. Because for decades, the world, as you rightfully said, became inured, became desensitized to Palestinian pain and suffering. That, it's okay, Palestinians die every day, Palestinians are killed by Israel every day. So long as it's controllable, 2, 3, 5 maybe a day and so on. So long as we don't see their pain visibly. So in Israel, so long as people in Tel Aviv can go to the beach and nightclubs and so on, that's fine. We don't want to see what Israel is doing to the Palestinians. So they tried to normalize an extremely abnormal situation. And they tried to make the world accept this as something that can last forever. Every time anybody raised his or her head, they would bash them down and they would call them terrorists and don't do anything. But now, as you said, rightfully so, the Palestinian question is back. It imposes itself on your table globally because it is one of the most horrific cases of injustice that is allowed to continue with full impunity. And therefore, this is a test for the conscience of people and systems and regimes and multilateral organizations. And it will continue to do so because the Palestinians are not in the habit of lying down and dying quietly. And we have the right to resist. How we choose to resist is something we have to decide on, okay? But the issue is that we have rights and we are claiming nothing more than what other people enjoy. Our freedom, our dignity, our right to live in peace on our own land, the right to self-determination. These are things that supposedly the West formulated and guaranteed to everybody else except Palestine and the Palestinian people. So it's not going to go away, no matter how much you try to ignore it. It will come back time and time again until you have the courage and the integrity to deal with the core issues, not to constantly try to skirt around it and see how you can subjugate or subdue the Palestinian people, how you can malign them and smear them and so on, how you can exclude them from the protection of the law. No. And so I think many people are beginning to see that now and see that without this just solution to the Palestinian tragedy, to the horror that the Palestinians undergo and have been undergoing for decades, there will be no peace, no stability, no security, not just for Israel within the region and probably even beyond. So a real solution would mean addressing the real causes.
Dr. Ashrawi, thank you very much for the time you've given me and for speaking to me. Take care. Stay
You're
safe.
most welcome, Karan. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We'll be stretched out to During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.